my thoughts and answer the questions on the two videos that we were given, the traces of trade and the differences between us, race, the power, and illusion minds. Over First, overall, I want to my thoughts on both the videos. I thought they were really both intriguing videos to watch with two different emotional outcomes. With the traces of trade, that video brought me to tears when I was watching it. Watching the members of the D. Wolf family explore their family past and seeing what they learned of their tarnished past, and then the differences between us, the race video. Um, that was actually for me very interesting, with learning about the DNA processing and the biological findings of race, and how even though we are such a diverse society, but we're so similar based on our DNA. I found that was really, really interesting. So the first question that was proposed is, in the traces of trade, what role did racialization play in the creation and maintenance of industry and commerce in Bristol, Rhode Island? To what extent do you believe the advantages and disadvantages caused by racialization may still be in effect in Bristol, Rhode Island today? In this video, what issues held significant raised questions, or stirred strong emotion within you? Well, in this movie, the very first thing that we see with racialization is the fact in Africa, the enslaved Africans, the very first thing that that had done to them was they were baptized and they were given Christian names, and they were stripped their African names. And then they were put into a dark dungeon, where they had to wait overnight for the slave ships to come to pick them up. And they were traded not for money, but for final goods that were being produced here in America. And when they came over to the States, the jobs that they were given in Bristol were to lay brick, to lay stone along the roadways, creating these barriers between the roads and houses, and building the commerce for Rhode Island to be able to take the raw goods and to produce the final goods that they were using for trade. The advantage that came with it is, yes, now they've got all this commerce up there. But the disadvantage is the fact that the population is still very single race now, and it's tarnished the Bristol society in Rhode Island. And it's also something that you wouldn't have, I personally did not expect to have happen in the North, when the North in historical seemed not as active in slavery as the South, as you learn growing up in history class. Some of the issues that were brought up that stood out to me was how involved the Episcopal Church really was in in slave trade. Growing up as an Episcopalian, it really struck a nerve with me, because I see that church, for me, as a place where you wouldn't expect as Christians to be so involved in slave trade. It would be a place that you would find refuge, and that's historically what churches were sanctuary for people to get away from problems like that. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was the fact that, because of the past, in the 53rd National Convention, they are starting taking steps forward for mending the past and helping those who have connections with the past. One of the questions that then developed in my mind is because I know that my family we can trace back to the settlement of the United States and before them coming here to the States. And it makes me wonder whether or not any of my ancestors were connected to the slave trade and what, like, being part of it, or were they on the other side of the issue and trying to stop it. So that was something that I know I would personally want to start researching myself and seeing what my ancestors did. Now the question for the other movie, it states, in the differences between us, race the power of illusion minds. To what extent do you think belief in illusion of race contributes to the creation and perpetuation of the perpetuants that led to racialization? To what extent has the illusion of race influenced your thinking about people whose ethnicity is different than your ethnicity? In this video, what jumped out at you, raising questions or stir emotions in you? I think with the idea that people always thought that our skin color is what defines us is a little overwhelming to think about, and knowing that it has little to nothing to distinguish us, and how closely connected we are, even though our DNA has many, many parts to it. There's only a few things that distinguish our differences, whether it would be on your ability in athletics or your musical talent. But then they talk about, for example, the penguins, and they all look the same, but they're all so diversely different. But they're all the same style of penguin. That's just that's mind blowing to think about. And I guess I never really thought about how stuff like that would influence me in thinking of people of different ethnicity. Because of growing up, I've always been taught that we're all the same. We all are equal in the sight of God, and that we need to respect our neighbors. And so I've never seen myself define somebody. Yes, they may be my next door neighbor. She's originally from India. Her ethnicity is Indian, so we've got to experience her culture, but I never thought it as something different. It's always been there, and I guess maybe it's because it's just something I grew up with, and it's just nothing that has affected me so much, especially now looking at our society today and how there's so much conflict going on, and in the news it's always a racial battle between this group and that group, and they're always tying race, and race shouldn't be an issue because we're all created in one image, likeness of God. So what jumped out at me in the documentary was the fact that our DNA is so complex as the human race, but we're all so similar. And the fact that historically people were not split into groups based on skin tone, but because of social status, wealth, and slavery has been around since biblical times. Um, so it's just, you would think people would have understood that slavery was bad, and that even back in history, people were trying to get rid of slavery. Look at Moses. Moses got his people out of slavery, and it's still, slavery ends up back. And you'd think in our Christian roots, we'd see it would be wrong, but We didn't, and it still happens today.